This week on Capitol Report, Biden versus Trump, what we learned from this first presidential debate.
Every single thing he said is a lie. Every single one.
I really don't know what he said at the end of that sentence. I don't think he knows what he said either.
Here at home, lawmakers hammer away on some key bills during a special session at the Capitol.
We're voting to increase motor vehicle taxes here today.
Well, that's certainly not true.
Plus, 4 charged with election fraud in Bridgeport face a judge.
Do you feel like your client is a fall woman, a fall guy?
Patsy is a good word.
Will declaring gun violence a public health crisis lead to change?
The impact it's having on our country is far wider than I think most people may realize.
And a couple of Huskies hit the jackpot at the NBA draft.
It really means the world to me, and I wouldn't trade this for anything.
I'm really ready to get to Portland and get to work.
Playtime is over. Capitol Report starts now. Welcome to Capitol Report. I am Tom Dutch. We are so glad you're spending part of this Sunday morning alongside a fired-up panel this morning. The great Daniel Wong, mayor of Bloomfield, Connecticut.
Good morning, Tom.
Joe Arasumas, former Speaker of the House.
Good morning.
Part-time football coach, I guess, right?
Part-time.
Liz Kranz, beaming Liz Kranz this morning, Republican strategist. Now beaming Johnny Mack, former Republican Senate Minority Leader.
Somebody who will not be arguing about my golf handicap.
All right, guys. Hey, so did you watch the debate Thursday night? We all did. An old song lyric might sum up the entire affair. It goes something like this. Laugh about it, shout about it, when you got to choose. Any way you look at it, you lose. Yep, Simon and Garfunkel, Mrs. Robinson. And it might just be what many Americans are feeling right now. The most succinct debate analysis is this. President Joe Biden stumbled and bumbled. Donald Trump repeatedly stretched the truth. With the election just about 4 months away, there's an elephant in the room for the Democratic Party. The question still being asked, is Joe still our guy? As for the GOP, it continues to be Donald Trump being Donald Trump, and his base continues to lean into that. So, panel, what did we learn last Thursday night? Danielle Wong, a delegate to the convention in Chicago, right?
I am a
delegate. All right, what do you think? What do we got to do?
So here's what we got to do. We got to really understand what the national leaders are going to do. What are the conversations and discussions are going to be like with the president now? After that debate, there was deep panic that reigned out between the Democratic Party nationwide, right? And so that's a fact. The president had a very bad night. He had a very bad night. And I think that aside from the skill and the delivery, we have to really focus on the substance as well. What's happened under his administration, right? And so do we have a bad night of Biden, or do we have 4 years of terribleness with Trump? So, those are some of the things that are all up in the air. And as a delegate going to be in Chicago this August, we're really, heads down. What are we going to do? What's the plan?
Yeah.
The issue really is, too, and you're short on time, right? I mean, in order to be on the ballot in Ohio, you have to have that candidate decided on by August 7th, which is before your convention. Yeah. So the mechanics are really difficult there. The other issue you have now is widespread panic among congressional Democrats. In the Senate, obviously, as well as in the House. You've got candidates that and political apparatus at the national level in Washington, D.C., absolutely panicked about how this is going to impact the down ballot. The biggest issue being obviously voter apathy. I mean, if you watch last night, I think anybody who was actually thinking about voting for Joe Biden, if you watch any of the Frank Luntz and those kinds of things, those folks are no longer leaning in that direction. So Democrats have a real problem on their hands. They're going to have an issue raising money. They're going to have an issue getting volunteers, and they're not convincing voters. And the bigger issue from my perspective is who is actually running the country?
Yeah, well, look, let's go to the presidential record and what Joe Biden has done. I don't think anybody can argue that he's had a successous presidency. The historians...
I mean, I would argue.
Well, okay, somebody could. But when we roll it back based in fact, you look at what he's done with NATO, look at what he did with the Jobs Act, you looked at the Infrastructure Act, you looked at the Border Act. You continue on the line, he's been incredibly successful. On a world stage where everything's happening, he's been incredibly successful. Now, is it him? Is it his staff? It almost doesn't matter. He's at the head. He's put the people in place, and we're doing great work. The problem is the American people have concerns with whether Joe Biden has the mental capacity to be that commander-in-chief, and unfortunately last night on stage in front of everybody, it was reinforced that he doesn't. The Democrats do have to make a change, and whether it's Gretchen Whitmer, Gavin Newsom, those conversations can happen. But Joe Biden, being the statesman that he is, and I love him to death and I respect everything he's done, he has to now look in the mirror. and say, am I the right person to prevent this country from suffering under Donald Trump for the next 4 years? I think the short answer is he isn't.
Well, respectfully, if it's going to come down to Joe Biden looking in a mirror and saying, I can't do it, he's never going to admit that. He's never going to admit that. And, you know, some people are going to say, well, his wife Jill has to be the one. I don't know their dynamics. That's a tremendous burden to put on her. It's going to have to be the Democratic leaders around the country are going to have to go to him and say, you're going to lose to Donald Trump, and that's going to be your legacy if you don't get out. Because Joe Biden may be a lot of wonderful things, but he's also extremely arrogant. We've heard a lot of his conversations about how he does that, and a lot of politicians are. That's not a criticism. So I don't
call it confidence.
I don't see him bowing out. Look, I think the most devastating thing, Claire McCaskill, former Democratic U.S. Senator from Missouri, said Joe Biden had one job to do last night, and he failed. That was to tell America I'm up to the job, and he's not. And so from a Trump perspective, and you know how I feel about Donald Trump, his argument that Vladimir Putin in Russia thinks you're weak, China and Xi Jinping think you're weak, Iran funding Hezbollah and Hamas think you're weak. That's a devastating argument where many Americans who may not like Donald Trump are going to say, he's strong, we need strength.
More to come on this, guys. So at the state capitol, the House passed an omnibus special session bill. The bill changes the way cars are assessed for the purpose of taxation, a change that many Republicans believe will increase car tax bills, while supporters of the change believe it will streamline the car tax and possibly lower it for some people. The bill also includes a measure that averts a large tax increase on commercial vehicles. It also allows the Regional Water Authority to bid and to acquire Aquarium Water Company. As for the process behind getting everyone back to the special session, House Speaker Matt Ritter showed a little sliver of frustration. You're going to love this clip. Watch this.
Half the people can't come on special sessions, so it really stinks because you don't have everybody here. Half the people who come are angry because they're here. Half the people don't like the bills that are in the call. Half the people don't like the bills that weren't part of the call. Half the people won't like the food we serve today. Special sessions are awful for legislative leaders, but at the end of the day, we felt an obligation to get the car tax thing done, and we worked with our colleagues and gave them things that they felt were timely and necessary for them.
Attaboy, Matt. He wasn't the only one complaining. Here's Minority Leader Vin Candelora, the Candyman, weighing in on the car tax issue. Watch this.
It's sort of moving food around the plate. You know, last year, the Senate Democrats created this task force to address our car tax crisis. They met 6 times. They put out this report and provided no answer for the state of Connecticut. And so now we're left with a bill that's trying to address a problem when the reality is the Democrats have misplaced their priorities in the state of Connecticut.
If only you talked like that when you were in charge, huh? Your boy Ritter did, gave it to him.
Well, when I first wanted to do the morning press conferences, I was told by all the advocates, it's a mistake, you're going to say things. But that was real. That frustration was real. That balancing it was real. And I appreciate Matt Ritter being so comfortable in himself to come out and say it. It is. It really does stink because you don't control the entire agenda as Speaker. You got to negotiate with the Senate. You got to negotiate with the governor. Your members always see the missed opportunities that happen during session, and they want a do-over. And to finally scope it, it's very difficult. So the frustration's real.
Why don't we get away with the car? Why don't we just let's focus on the issues? Why don't we get away with the car tax? Why don't we just mess around with it, Johnny?
Well, we should get rid of the car tax, and the end result would be that the towns would make up for that by putting it on commercial and residential properties. That doesn't work for everybody. They're winners and losers. Mayors and first selectmen hate that because they're going to have their tax rate go up. And when you have winners and losers in the Capitol, it's really hard to get something passed unless the winners largely outnumber the losers, and that doesn't happen here. The other issue that they passed yesterday, which I want to mention, is the idea of the Regional Water Authority bidding on purchasing Aquarium. I have no idea if that's a good outcome. It may very well be. But as someone who represented towns that were serviced by Aquarium, and most importantly Easton, which is the home of the reservoir and all of the land that protects that water, to not have a public hearing in front of the legislature, I think is a huge mistake. And Jonathan Steinberg, Democrat, chairman of the Energy Committee, stated it and voted no because of that. I think it was a big mistake.
And Danielle, so where do you sit on the car tax issue? You'd love to see it get rid of it or not?
I think the car tax issue is a nuisance. I think largely everyone wants it to see it go away. How do we do that is the issue. And so for me, it's very concerning to see that there are no solutions that are applicable to my particular town. How do you make up the delta for a car tax that is used to balance municipal and operating budgets, right? And so is it a phase out over so many many years? What does that look like? It's going to take towns and cities a very long time to figure out how to diversify their tax revenue side of the house. And so until we figure that out holistically, is the state going to come in and continue to do these reimbursements? Are we going to lower the cap on the mill as it is right now for car tax? What are the solutions and how do we execute that operationally? That's kind of the substance that I want to see.
Yeah, look, I mean, I think special session, obviously it's the bills that didn't get on that people really are, I think, is important. We're not talking about, a holistic, huge climate change bill that would have had huge implications. So I think Republicans stayed consistent in terms of their vote from the session in the House anyway on what the bill looked like when it went through the House earlier. And kudos to Tammy Zawadzowski and Joe Zullo for their work on getting that bill across the finish line.
Right, guys. Hey, so 4 people are facing election fraud charges stemming from the 2019 Bridgeport primary, headed to court last week for their arraignment. Who'd have thought? None of them spoke publicly about their arrest, but an attorney for one of the 4 made abundantly clear that his client is nothing more than a patsy for the guy who is in fact mayor of Connecticut's largest city. Watch this.
How is it possible that the person who benefited from this alleged electoral voter or electoral fraud absentee ballot scheme is not a co-conspirator? And is it like it strikes as, well, we need to indict somebody, and so let's indict the woman with an 8th grade education who's lived in public housing her whole life.
Johnny Mac, Ken Krajewski, not a dime back, huh?
Well, first of all, this is just an attempted jury nullification. Why did they indict his client? Because they believe his client committed a crime, and he or she should be indicted regardless of their education. If any of these 4 defendants, or in the 2023 case, have information that Joe Ganim played a role in this, they'll give it up, they'll get no penalties, and the prosecution will go after the big fish. If they don't have information, he's just trying to nullify the jury, saying, don't pick on my poor person. They didn't know what they were doing when they violated the law.
Yeah, John, I think that's an excellent point. You're listening to a lawyer. They're making the case. It's a legal proceedings. They're going to do that. But the facts will come out. And if Joe Ganim or anybody else senior on his staff was directing people to undertake this activity, they are going to get charged. So let's see how it plays out. But right now, it's just a lawyer doing a great job of lawyering.
All right, guys, up next on Cap Report, more on the special session. We'll discuss that and more with the kid, News 8's political contributor, my pal Mike Cerulli, when Cap Report comes roaring back. Don't go away. Well, the water companies and car taxes weren't the only things that were passed in the special session. Joining us to break down what else was passed is News 8's political contributor, my pal Mike Cerulli. So, Mike, what other goodies were loaded into this latest aircraft carrier?
Hey, good morning to you, Tom. Probably the most headline-grabbing measure in that special session bill, aside from the motor vehicle tax changes and the RWA charter changes, was an inclusion related to school construction project management. Now, anyone who follows Connecticut political news closely will hear the words school construction and immediately think of Costa Diamantis, who was indicted on corruption charges related to his time as the head of the Office of School Construction. The special session bill reinstates a ban on so-called self-performance, which is that practice of school construction project managers bidding on subcontracts. It's the latest in a series of back and forths on the issue of school project self-performance. And it did come at the insistence of the Lamont administration. Of course, it's all underlined by those recently announced corruption charges.
School construction, Mike, who knew it could be so controversial? So what else was in there, Mike?
Yeah, a change related to how the State Historical Preservation Office reviews projects. That drew some interest. A tweak to help out businesses who utilized a pandemic-era tax credit was also in there. And so was a measure intended to help what they're now calling innovation banks expand in Connecticut. So we might net some new jobs from this special session.
Historic preservation. Come on, Mike. I'm sure that was a lively debate, huh?
You'd be surprised.
So, Mike, well, we got you here. You heard all the debate talk. What do you say, Mike?
Well, I'll just say this. I would never, ever claim to have been a 6 handicap on live television as the president did. But I think I could probably say that I can outdrive the Capitol Report panel by a lot. And I bet you, Tom, I could do with a 3-wood.
Jeez. Fine. Listen, Aaron Simowitz is game on, Cerulli, Mike. All right, go. Yeah, we'll go into that, with the reservoir job. Come on, let's go.
Yeah, we'll go ahead into the RWA Reservoir in Branford Jail. Come on, driving contest, long drive.
The great Mike Cerulli, thanks for joining us as always.
Great to be here.
Up next on Cal Report, the divided response over the U.S. Surgeon General declaring gun violence a public health crisis. We'll discuss when we get back along with our handicaps. Already good. For the first time ever, the U.S. Surgeon General has declared gun violence a public health crisis. Connecticut's U.S. senators applauding the move. Gun violence is the leading cause of death for children and teens. And Dr. Vivek Murthy says the death rate here is at least 5 times higher than any other high-income country. Even though Connecticut's gun laws are among the strictest in the nation, doctors here support the move by the Surgeon General. Watch this.
Connecticut has gone very far in adopting legislation to protect us from firearm violence. There are laws that require the safe storage of firearms in any home where they are. In addition to that, we have universal background checks in the state of Connecticut. And of course, there's always more we can do to keep each other safe, especially for gun owners out there. If you own a firearm, make sure that's secured. Make sure that a child cannot get access to that firearm.
National Rifle Association disagrees with the Surgeon General, calling the declaration, quote, an extension of Biden administration's war on law-abiding gun owners. Guys, McKinney, you're instrumental in all this years ago.
Well, I'm just not really sure what the implications of gun violence being a public health is all about. I mean, we have gun violence in our country. We have way too much gun violence in our country. Too many people are dying by guns. We need to do a better job of preventing that. If the Surgeon General can play a role in that, great. I just think this is more about, you know, politics and fluff than it is real substance. We still need Congress to get involved and do things like ban bump stocks and other things that can make us safer.
Yeah, John, I agree with a lot of the pragmatic approach to it, what we need in legislation. Our own Senator Murphy was the leader. He got people around the table and did something they said could not be done. So really, really proud of him. But having it being a public health crisis is really true, and it will raise the awareness. It will get more people talking about it. Hopefully we'll see some NIH money attached to it. What we're not addressing is, or talking about enough in my opinion, is never mind the exact injuries that happen because of weapons. What about the mental health side of it? I know people now when they walk into a restaurant, they're scoping out where the exits are in case something was to happen. I know people that are out walking about on a daily basis that wear sneakers instead of flip-flops because in their head they're thinking about if there's a crisis, if something happens, how do I get away? In flip-flops, I just can't run as fast. When people are making those decisions in their daily life, it is a crisis and we need to do more for it. Not only do we need to protect them physically, we got to look at what our brain is telling us and how we're looking at this world so suspectly all the time now to where we're making decisions of what we wear because we're going out in public. That's scary.
You know what's scary? Living in a community where there is rampant gun violence in a state that has some of the strictest gun laws in the country that are not being enforced, and having Democrat state senators advocating that we not enforce our gun laws. It is egregious. So we cannot have a conversation about preventing gun violence if we refuse to enforce the laws that we have. We have to have a serious conversation about this. In the state of Connecticut, we are not enforcing the gun laws that we have on the books. So unless everyone is going to get on the same page and we are going to give law enforcement the tools that they need in order to actually enforce the laws that we have, and we're going to allow prosecutors to do their job, none of this matters, period.
Liz, you've been amazingly consistent on that, and I wholeheartedly agree with you. I think you feel it in your core, and you've consistently said that. So, yes, you're right.
Yeah, so I think that that's the start, declaring gun violence a public health crisis. In the wake of George Floyd, the state of Connecticut also declared racism a public health crisis. It allowed more allocation of resources, a heightened awareness of the issue, and a structural look into how we are operating as a state.
All right, guys. Next on Cal Report, the NBA draft, UConn, and fashion. The details when we get back. Don't go away. No secret that UConn Stefan Castle and Donovan Clingan would be selected early in last week's NBA draft. What was the secret? Well, their draft night outfits. So who came out on top in the fashion department? Let's start with the number 4 pick in the draft, Stefan Castle. Similar to his game, Castle was flashy yet understated, double-breasted suit with white speckles, a very impressive look for the 19-year-old. Give him some bonus points for the giant Castle necklace. Nice touch. As for Clingan, well, he went traditional, looking more like a guy going to the Bristol Central prom with a bow tie and classic tuxedo. Hats off to Clingan for honoring his late mother, the lining of the jacket adorned with her photos. And here's to both of the kids going far in the NBA draft, guys. Who wants a piece of this one?
The drip was real. It looked good.
Yep.
Awesome.
And look, the whole thing about Donovan Clingan really is a powerful message. Here's a Connecticut kid that was at a Connecticut public high school that was courted by every single private school out there and saying you're never going to achieve it unless you go off to a prep school. He said, no, I'm going to do it here with my town. He went to the University of Connecticut and people said he's not going to play. Not only did he play, he won 2 consecutive national championships. And the way he acts and talks about his mother really does warm my heart. That's a kid grounded in realism.
Yeah, an amazing story. He stayed at Bristol Central because he wanted to break his mom's rebounding record. And for people who don't know, his mom tragically died of cancer. But you're right, Joe. People told him, you're not going to make it in the pros unless you go to the IMG Academy or those kind of places. He said, no, I'm staying here because that's where my mom wanted me to be. I'm a half a mile from home. Great story.
Yeah, I can't argue with that.
All right, guys. That's Johnny McKinney, the Bronny James of the panel. That's good one for this week with Danielle, Joe, Liz, Johnny Mac, the Bronny James.
He's going to be more like Bronny James when he misses.